Greetings again. It's week 3, and we are diving into some very challenging discussion this week. In our book, Bruce now moves into a discussion of what kindness looks like and feels like from differing perspectives and points of privilege. In some ways, this is an extension of the conversation on the differences between being nice and being kind. For often, in an effort to stay in the realm of nice, we sidestep or ignore issues that might bring discomfort or create conflict. However, this is not always the kindest path. Sometimes kindness requires us to find a way to talk about difficult things and to allow all voices to be heard, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Our scripture for this week is a parable Jesus tells about a widow and a judge. Jesus has been and continues to speak to his disciples, and the parable is framed by questions of prayer and faith, with the heart of the parable being about a quest for justice. Now in it, Jesus employs a rhetorical stance that he uses elsewhere in Luke. He first shares a story or an example of the ways in which we humans struggle in our attempt to live into God's future. And then he points out that even as we falter, God does not. So in our parable, the point is not that God is like an unjust judge who will eventually relent to the persistent petitions of the widow. Rather, we might read today's passage as, if even the most unjust judges will finally relent to the ceaseless petitions of a defenseless widow, how much more will God, who is after all a good judge, answer our prayers? But God is only one piece of this parable, for there is also the widow. We've already talked about the precarious place of widows in the ancient Near East when we discussed the stories of Ruth and Naomi. Yet while this widow's social location certainly numbers her among the marginalized, the widow in this parable resists the exploitation to which she is being subjected. Like other widows before her, such as Tamar in Genesis or Ruth and Naomi, the widow in Luke 18 takes matters into her own hands. Her persistence and call for justice is such that the judge characterizes her actions as aggressive even. The judge finally relents, not out of any suddenly found compassion or remorse, but because she is literally, quote, giving him a black eye in the community. To bring this into our discussion of kindness, we might recognize that our interactions as human beings are places where conflict may occur, especially as we talk about and define things like justice. We may experience each other as aggressive as we advocate for our beliefs, our ideals, and the things we need. But the kindest route, as we see in Luke's praise of the widow, may not be to avoid the conflict, but instead be persistent in naming and addressing the tensions and conflicts, and then handling them well. And, might I suggest, perhaps it is these smaller interactions, like our groups, where we have the time to listen deeply and speak thoughtfully, where we can begin that work. Blessings today upon your discussion.